Good evening, everyone, and happy Tuesday, the day, of course, after Labor Day. Hope you had a very good, long Labor Day weekend. Hope you enjoyed it, went out, have fun with the family, and just generally have a good time. This is the VIPC, the Virgin Islands Political Consortium, where we interview the candidates for Senate and Governor for the, of course, 2018 general election, which happens, of course, on November 6th. Tonight, we're sitting with none other than Warren Mosler, a gubernatorial candidate. Warren is no stranger. How are you, sir?
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Good to see you. We're going to have a good, long discussion with Warren, of course. We're going to be asking the pertinent questions as you expect. And we have other interviews coming up. Not tonight. This is the only interview tonight. It's a gubernatorial candidate, and we try to give them 2 hours of time to clearly state their plans. Next week, Albert Bryan and Governor Kenneth Mapp have been confirmed, and we'll have more announcements coming soon. So Warren, thank you for joining me tonight.
Good to be here.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
Good. The campaign trail has been busy?
It's been busy.
Yes. Okay, so I like to ask this to all the candidates. What make you qualify, do you believe, to run for governor?
Well, there's two things. There's the reason I'm running and why I'm qualified. So to answer your question, why I'm qualified is my 45 years in finance and experience in problem solving, running companies, and doing the types of things that need to be done, and my just history of coming up with ideas that make sense to people that we can implement here to make this the kind of place we all want to live in. Mm. Okay, now the other question is, why am I running? And that is much simpler to answer. I'm running just as a matter of conscience. Mm. Okay, so the example I use is if you're walking on the boardwalk and you see somebody drowning and you know how to swim, I have to offer to help. Okay, now if they pick somebody else, it's okay, but I have to offer to help, or I can't sleep at night. Mm. I can't walk past somebody in trouble without offering to help, without having my conscience bother me. Mm. And so, I'm living here, the Virgin Islands, and the WAPA bills are very high. Now, I can pay my WAPA bill. It's not a problem for me, but I just feel bad for all the other people who are struggling and just leaving the territory. And so I come up with ideas on how we can bring our WAPA bills down. Mm. And I just am compelled by conscience to present those, and we'll be talking about that later. Okay. So the school system, my children are grown. They're not in schools here, but I feel bad for people who are struggling with the school system, and the children we're losing to the problems in the school children, in the school system. And I look at it, and because I've come up with ideas, I feel obligated, just as a matter of conscience, to present these ideas. And I have a whole list of detailed plans on my website. It's mosler4governor.com with a number 4, where everybody can go and read my proposals. And if you like what you see and you want them implemented, then I'm asking for your vote. If you don't like what you see, it's fine, vote for somebody else, and I'll go, my conscience is clear, I can sleep at night, I presented my proposals, and I go back to living out my sunset years in paradise. All right,
let's. Yeah. I think this is an appropriate question because, of course, you're a well-established man. Yeah. You've made yourself. You have multiple businesses. Would you forego a salary?
And the answer is absolutely not, because I'm a progressive, and I'm a progressive economist, and I think that's grossly unfair to the candidates who can't afford to do that. I don't think I should have some kind of a political advantage because I don't need to take a salary, and they do. Okay, and so it just goes against my moral compass to use that as an advantage against the other candidates. And this came up before. People would ask me this when I ran against Donna Christensen. Mm-hmm. I had the same answer, and now,
some people took a different view. You had Bloomberg who ran, and not the view of one having an advantage over the candidates, but of that, you know what, I really don't need it. And again, not looking at it as if from an advantage point, but in the sense of, this is where we are as a territory. Yeah. You and I have spoken about the financial conditions of the territory, and you basically not needing it. And so again, not from the point of I have a political advantage, but I see where the territory is at, I see what we need, and I'm coming to work as a servant to help lift it.
Yeah.
That point of view.
And I understand that. and that is my point of view. But I don't want to use that as some kind of political advantage over the candidates who can't afford to do it. I'm not trying to buy the election. And to me, that's an example of trying to buy the election. Now, that's not to say I'm probably not going to donate that and 10 times more to the community like I normally do. But that's a different issue. Okay, that's not using the salary. I'm going to donate my salary and they're not. I'm not going to do that. Okay, it's a level playing field based on your ideas, your proposals, what the other people can do, and not based on whether or not they need to have a salary. I don't want that to be the criteria for a voter.
Okay, so I've been speaking to many people in the community about all the candidates, and when asked about Warren, a lot of people love your ideas. One thing you hear is, well, you know, we don't see Mr. Mosler in the community enough when it's not election time. So when it's election, you're out there. You know, you go to the different areas. You cross the you know, that needs to be crossed. But past that, an involved Warren is not seen enough. Would you agree with that?
It's probably true, but the thing is, I have a full-time job. You know, I'm working all the time, and I have a very simple life. I get up at 5 or 5:30 in the morning. I do my correspondence. I got out for some exercise. I go into the office, do some work, and during the afternoon, and then we have dinner, and then I'm home in bed by 7:30 at night.
Probably you could take some of that time, and you know.
Yeah, I'm not like, why would I don't go out in bars drinking at nights or anything like that. It's just not what I do. I'm not against it. I'm not holding that against anybody. But the places they'd say, like, I don't go to the market. Like, I'm not allowed to. Elizabeth goes to the market, and she'd feel like I'm taking her job or something like that. And
so you don't think you could intermingle a little bit more? Again, you're running for office. Well, you care about the territory.
But I certainly intermingle in my own way. I probably know more people in the community than most of the others, even though they don't realize that. I know when we do go out, canvassing with our volunteers, we'll go into the housing communities, and half the people come out, oh, hi, Warren, how you doing? And see you, because, we see each other everywhere during the day at the different businesses, wherever they might be working, and in just in normal life. And so it's not that I'm like hiding anywhere. I'm out in the community like a normal person. I'm living a normal life like a normal person. I'm not out politicking all the time. Why would I be?
But part of it is, and that's why, I mean, we know how the politics work, but part of it is a legit, some residents, you know what, I love his ideas, but I don't know Warren too well.
Sure. And so during election time, I try to, get out there as much as we can. We're out every day somewhere in the neighborhoods, either here or in St. Thomas. And, I'm very accessible. You've walked into my office out of nowhere. You don't need an appointment or anything like that. And hundreds of people have done that all the time. So the best way for them, but there's 30,000 voters. So nobody's going to know everybody.
Right.
And the best way is to talk to people who know me. And there's a lot of people who know me. All the people involved in the ferry know me. All the people involved in the construction business know me from working on little projects and things like that. All the people who've worked in my office, all the children the students who've interned in my office and all their families, they all know who I am. And so talk to people who know me. It won't be hard to find someone. It might take you 2 or 3 people before you find somebody who actually does know me in the community, I would think.
So, of course, again, you're well-established man. You have multiple organizations. You said, you donate on an annual basis to a variety of nonprofits. Do you have off your mind some of the non-profit organizations that you support?
Well, yeah, I do. But again, I don't want to use that because somebody else can't afford to support these. I don't want to get rewarded because I'm supporting nonprofits. That's not what this is about. This is about a job interview. We've got critical things that need to be done. I have my proposals. They need to know about me, that I am a contributor. That's what I'm saying.
I think that's all that is part of it. People would, and again, for a candidate like yourself, people would love to know, okay, you know what, I'm seeing Warren here, it's just an idea of getting to know you better. That's what I think that is.
So you know Matthew 6, right? You're supposed to give your alms in private and not discuss it, otherwise.
So scripture,
Right. So I'm not saying that there are other scriptures that might say something else, but that resonates with me. Okay, I'm not doing those things to gain anybody's favor, and most of the things I do I'm not, whatever I tell you, I tell people, look, just keep it confidential. Okay, because and I'm really not doing that as a reason. I'm not asking for anybody's vote because of what I did for this organization or that organization. It's just not me. I don't do that.
Okay. Yeah. All right, Ryan, so a lot of issues to discuss. Let's start with the big one. Let's talk about GRS.
GRS.
And we've heard varying ideas from candidates as to how they would contribute in solving that problem. What is Warren Mosler's plan to solve GRS's problem?
Okay, so you talk about qualifications. So I've been in finance since 1973, 45 years. And at reasonably high levels. I used to visit, up until a few years ago, the Federal Reserve regularly, the Treasury. And even last year, I was making presentations in front of pension funds like Toronto Teachers Pension Fund with $200 billion in their assets. And then on the next day, we're at FedEx in Atlanta making presentations to their pension fund. So it's something I know a little bit about, and I do it in a very sophisticated way on the investment side. And so when I look at what we have, I know what I'm looking at, and I'm comfortable with it. And I recognized immediately, I was at the GERS meeting, that none of our highly paid consultants from the states have correctly valued the unfunded liability. They're all saying it's about $3 billion that the pension fund has as an unfunded liability. Well, what they're forgetting is that they're not aware of, in the Virgin Islands, we get to keep our own income taxes. So when we pay out $3 billion to retirees, immediately some part of that is withheld for income taxes for our government.
Right.
And it's their marginal tax rate. Some of these people have higher incomes from other places. So if we pay out $3 billion, I'll just throw out a round number, we might get $1 billion of it withheld for taxes. So we give them 3, we get 1 back. So how much does it actually cost the VI government to pay out $3 billion? It only costs $2 billion. If I give you $3, but you have to give me 1 back, how much does it cost me to give you $3?
Right.
It only costs me $2.
Right.
Okay, so number one, every one of them, all these other candidates are working on a number that's $1 billion too high. Now, $2 billion is still a very large number. I'm not
I was about to say
that away.
So let's say your equation and your theory here works.
But let's start with the fact that they made a pretty substantial mistake.
Right.
They made like $1 billion. It's just $1 billion, but it's
okay. I mean,
for some people that's still a lot of money. Okay, so all right. So number one, the unfunded liability isn't as large as they think it is. Now my first proposal is we had authorized $600 million in rum cover-over bonds a few years ago, that they were supposed to be sold to investors for $600 million, and that money was supposed to go into the GERS. And it didn't happen. And we can go into why it didn't happen, but the important thing is it didn't happen.
Right.
All right. Today, we can't do that.
No.
Investors won't buy those bonds.
Right.
But what we can do, which is unique to my proposal with everybody else, is we can just contribute those bonds directly to the GERS. Okay, a bond is just an agreement that you will get principal and interest based on the rum money for 30 years. You got to get paid, yeah. Right, so we give that to the GERS. So let's look at, but you might say, look, if they're not good enough for the bondholders, why are they good enough for the GERS? Right. So if you're a bondholder and you've just invested $600 million into these bonds from the Maryland Teachers Retirement Fund, and at the end of the day, there's a major problem and you only get $550 million back, they've defaulted and you've lost money.
Right.
Okay. Well, if we contribute the bonds to the GERS as a gift, and someday they get $550 million instead of $600 million, it's not a tragedy. Because they're getting them for nothing.
But you're making it sound very, very simple.
It is very simple.
It is not.
Yes, it is.
I mean, so has any one of the proposals? You said you've been to these different states and you've presented at different.
A state can't do this. Okay, because estates don't keep their own income tax. When the income taxes get paid, they go to Washington. They don't go to the state.
Right.
So if they have a $3 billion payment, they lose the whole thing. We get $1 billion back. Now, states don't issue rum cover-over bonds.
Right.
But they have issued bonds to fund their pension funds. And they're able to sell them.
Right.
We're not.
Right.
Okay, the states who are not, I don't know that there are any, maybe Detroit or something like that, could have contributed bonds to their pension funds. But they didn't have the rum money to back them like we do. Now, if you look at the numbers, the rum money actually would The GRS would get their money back unless something happened.
But we don't have the RUM monies. You know, the RUM money is already obligated to the bondholders.
Not all of it. There's an extra $30 million a year.
About
28.
No, it's down to about 17 now. After you've given those same RUM companies monies for promotion and molasses and whatnot. Yeah. So it's a minimal amount.
So 17 million a year. Okay. Is about a 3% interest rate on 600 million. It will be $18 million a year. Okay, and then all right, and I'm going to go into what we can do for those RUM cover over bonds after this. But number one, we contribute the bonds. At the end, we also have a $175 million reserve fund at the end of the money. That would go to whoever,
so you take
to the bondholders.
You take the reserve and use it to go directly to.
It's there.
I know it's there already.
So 20, 30 years from now, when the other bonds are paid off, that money's there for the last bondholder, which is the GERS. So if the revenue stream isn't enough, the reserve fund is there to support the last amount of those bonds.
So you're saying the 17 million that we're left with after we've paid all our bondholders, you could use that as a security
that's available to be paid
to GRS.
Right.
And you're sure that they're going to agree to that?
Who?
Whoever we get in we're looking to pay GRS.
Yeah.
Right. So the bondholders are going to agree to that?
The other bondholders?
Yeah.
That money gets paid after they get paid.
I know. I'm talking about the $17 million that we're going to...
That doesn't go to bondholders.
It doesn't go... I know.
That would make our general fund smaller.
I get that. I know it's like... That's what we have remaining.
Right.
But you said that 17 million, we're going to use it as security for...
No, that will pay the interest on the GRS bonds.
On the GRS bonds?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, explain the GRS bonds. So I want the audience to get this clearly. So GERS now, what are we going to do?
A bond is a document.
Yes.
And the document says you own, you have coming to you the principal and interest on this $600 million face amount, which means you're going to get the interest every year, and at the end you will get the principal.
Right.
Okay, and the interest will come from what's available in the RUM cover over bonds.
Which is the 17 million.
Which happens to be 17 million this year.
And we're saying that amount is enough.
That's a minimal amount, but it's a start. And they've got the 600 million coming over time because the other bonds get paid off and they get reduced. And so the amount of money builds over time. It doesn't go down. It's 17 million this year, but it will go up, okay, as the other bonds are paid off. And this will be the last bonds to be paid off because the other ones are ahead of us.
Of course.
Okay. And I'm going to refinance those bonds anyway, which I'll get to in a minute. All right. So right now we'd be, let's say, in line behind the community disaster loan, the RUM cover over bonds. And then these would be the new RUM cover over bonds.
Right.
So they would be junior to the existing RUM cover.
Right.
And look, it's not ideal, but it's something. Right. And
what interest rates do you think the bondholders would get on that?
Well, if it is actually 17 million only available, then that's about 3% that year. Okay, but as it goes up, because it's been higher, and it depends on their production, and I have ways for them to increase their production, which I hope you ask me later.
Right.
Because if we can increase their production by 50%, there can be another $50 or $100 million.
I want to ask you that, but let's study a little bit.
Sure.
And so we were speaking of, let's say your math of we're cutting off $1 billion because of we keep our tax, our refunds, right? Okay, so and we're left with $2 billion.
Right.
Of GRS liability here on fund. Okay, so how much of that 2 billion is that 17 million is backing up?
Okay, it would back up 600 million over time, but because that liability is like a 30-year liability.
Right.
But I know we have an immediate cash flow problem, so it doesn't help that. But it will help payments down the road more than it's going to help tomorrow or the next day. But we have about 3 or 4 years. Cash now. Okay. And there are other things to back it up. We're just starting here.
Right.
This is a piece of the puzzle.
So that's one piece of the puzzle here. Let's talk about, you said you could increase capacity.
Okay, so the next
production.
Well, the next piece of the puzzle is when I was at the GRS meeting, you were out there. Hundreds of people wanted their money back.
Yeah.
Okay, so if somebody's put into the fund $70,000 or $100,000 over the years, in order to make their payments, the GRS needs to have over $200,000 invested to that person. The money you put in is not enough to cover your retirement.
Right.
Okay, they're dependent on other money coming in. Right. If you get your money back, so the unfunded liability just for that's attributable to that person might be $200,000 or $300,000. If we give this $100,000 back, our unfunded liability goes down by $200,000 or $300,000. So I say if people want their money back voluntarily, you explain to them that you're better off taking the payments, and they say, well, no, I want my money back. You give it to them.
Yeah.
Okay, so every person we give them to, it's at least 2 to 1 that I believe our unfunded liability goes down. Now, I would have to talk to our actuaries to see what the ratio is. Mm-hmm. But if you just do simple math, present value math, it's about 2 to 1.
We have about 8,000 people on the system right now, right? And GRC's assets portfolio is about $600 million.
Right.
How much would that dwindle? How if we are to pay off, say, 4,000 people who decide we want our money right now?
Yeah. So let's say it dwindled in half by 300 million, but the unfunded liability came down by 600 million. Now we have less money in it, but the amount we owe is a lot less, plus the 600 million of bonds, okay, plus the other things we're going to get to, and we're way better off. Okay, because let's say we had no unfunded liability, didn't have to make any payments, then 600 million would be more than enough.
It would have been.
We could give it out to everybody as a dividend.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not so much how much you have, but compare it to how much you owe. So if you can bring down what you owe faster than you bring down what you have. Okay, so let's say you've got $1,000 in your pocket and you owe $5,000.
Yeah.
You're in trouble. Yeah. Well, somebody says, you owe me $3,000. If you give me $500, I'll wipe it off.
Right.
Okay, so you do that. Okay, so now you only have $500 left.
Right.
Gee, you shouldn't have done that. You lost half your money. Yeah, but the amount you owe just went down by $3,000.
Just went down, yeah.
Okay.
So that is the concept of this puzzle there.
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
And that is something that's part of your plan?
Yes.
Okay, so we spoke of a while ago the rum companies and how you said you would increase production by about 50%?
Yeah, so, I said if we increase it by 50%, that money's not tied up by debt.
Right.
That would so our gross amount that comes in is 220 million.
20 million, 25.
Yeah. So if that doubles, or goes up 50%, it's another 100 million. Some goes to the rum company. We keep the rest. It doesn't go to bonds.
Right.
Okay, so how do we get our production up? Number one, I sit down with the rum companies and work with them to see what's going on and see what we can do for them, with them, to provide incentives, to help with the marketing to get it up. And so somebody I was talking to, Roy Luetz the other day, and he pointed out that he goes to Denmark all the time, and there's no Crucian rum in Denmark. So if we could get Denmark to start making it patriotic to drink Crucian rum,
right.
Okay, that would increase our production. I don't know how much those people drink, but I was there once. They drink a lot. It's cold.
Right.
So how do you do that?
Right.
Well, what else are we looking for from Denmark? Reparations. Okay, isn't that a nice way to pay us our reparations by setting it up so everybody drinks Crucian rum and we make another $30 or $40 million a year?
Right.
Costs them nothing. Their people are paying us through the federal rum tax that they have to pay anyway.
Yeah. So that's one idea.
It's a thought. It's certainly pie in the sky right now.
Right.
You know what? It makes a lot of sense.
It does.
It does make a lot of sense because they're looking for a way to get out of this moral dilemma they're in.
Yeah.
And this is a way to transfer a lot of money to us in a way that doesn't cost the government anything, and it's just a way you're substituting whatever you're drinking now for Crucian rum.
So that's an idea.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, it may be pie in the sky. We don't know.
Right. But what we're doing is supporting our own companies that are here. Okay. And when I sit down and talk to people about their businesses, which is another thing I've done, I tend to come up with these kinds of things that are a win-win for everybody. It's good for Denmark. It's good for us. It's good for the people there. It's good for everybody. And so I if I'm governor, that's what I'm going to be doing. Not just those companies. Okay. And so. So again, we look for other marketing opportunities, other ways that we can help them promote their products.
So the main two points of your GRS proposal that we spoke about those already. Yeah. The third one, however, we're not sure how that's going to pan out.
That's right. And here's another one that we're not sure is going to pan out, but it makes even more sense. And that is the rum cover-over bonds that are out there. I believe is 1.2 billion. Right?
1.2 billion or so. Yeah.
Okay. And because of the discount, because of the fear factor of what's going on, I think they're trading at an implied interest rate of about 7%. I haven't checked the market recently.
You mean GRS's portfolio?
No.
You're talking about the rum companies?
No, the investors' bonds that they have.
Oh, the investors, okay, yes.
If they were to sell them to another investor, that new investor would get 7%.
7%? Okay.
Something like that. It's very high.
Yeah.
Because they're worried about getting paid.
Yeah, of course.
Because we've got community disaster loans have come in front of them, and also what happened with Title III in Puerto Rico.
Exactly.
Promesa, has scared a lot of bondholders. Okay, so my idea is we can go to the federal government to help us out in a way that doesn't cost them anything and doesn't risk any taxpayer dollars. And that is, if they were to assist us, I'll tell you how they do that, in buying back these bonds at 7% yield. That's the rate you get if you bought them at a discount from investors. And it might not be 7, it might be 6, it might be 8, but I haven't looked it up in the last few weeks. But at, we'll say 7%, keep the numbers easy. And we can refinance them at 2%, and I'll explain how we'll do that with the Treasury's assistance. Then we would save 5%, which is $60 million a year. Now, with that $60 million, that could reduce the draw on our general fund by $60 million, or we can allocate more of that to the GERS. So if we allocated another $17 million to the GERS, now you're looking at a 6% return. And we can determine what return is fair. Okay, but at least we have some money to play with, to use. Tell
me why the federal government would buy into this.
Okay, so the reason the bondholders are unhappy is because their risk is that, okay, the federal government gives us the rum money. And then it goes into a special fund.
And then it goes to New York, and then it goes to the bondholders.
And the bondholders are afraid they're not going to get paid out of that. The federal government might divert that money somewhere else, like is risk.
But there are a lot of securities, though, on those bonds placed encoded in our law.
Yes, but the Title III changes all that. What happened with PROMESA, they broke all that apart. And so they're worried that there is now a real possibility that if we get into a Title III type of situation,
they may lose their money.
The federal government could tell them, sorry, you're going to get so many cents on the dollar, and that's it. They just don't know. Okay, it's an uncertainty. Whenever you get an uncertainty, they want out. That's not what they do. All right. So, but if the federal government were to buy those bonds from them, now it's the federal government, rum money, paying to the federal government. They're not worried about cutting themselves out. Okay, they have no risk. The money comes from them and it goes to them. It's just a pair-off. It's what we used to call a pair-off. And so it's completely risk-free. There's no taxpayer money at risk.
Why are they buying it from us, the federal government?
Okay, not from us, from the bondholders, to help us out.
Why are they moving us from the equation?
Okay, because it's a way for them to give assistance to the Virgin Islands that costs them zero, saves us $60 million a year, and let's say eases their conscience for what they had to do in the community disaster loans, which is to put those in front of us, causing us to have a problem.
That was a big
bonds.
disruption there.
And so here they can be the good guys for no risk, and be the hero. And then go back and run for office. Hey, look, we helped the Virgin Islands. They didn't do anything, but they did save us $60 million by allowing us to put them on both sides of the trade. The money comes into them, the money goes to them. And now the Treasury rate for a 10-year security right now, and I think these have an average life of about 10 years, is 2.86%. So the tax-free rate would be somewhere around 2%. And the way they work that is you can issue tax-free bonds that they're called what's called defeased by Treasury securities. They issue special Treasury securities for municipalities called slugs. It's like SLUGS or something like that. And these guarantee the municipal bonds in the market, and the people buy those as if they were tax-free government bonds. And that lowers the rate to about 2%. Okay, so that would save $50 million. Or $60 million, depending on the spread, and I don't know the exact spread.
Right.
Okay, so now we're making a little progress. Okay, in another half hour, we're going to make a lot more progress.
okay. To the listening audience,
yes,
your ideas are great, especially the two ideas here. But there are not certainties with them, right? So the prior ideas that we spoke about, those are things you'd work on right away if you were to be elected.
Yes, and these are things that can be done reasonably quickly. Okay, they're not things that require marketing or anything like that. Right. They can be done reasonably quickly. Right,
but again, the one with the rum, increasing production. That takes time, and it's still an uncertainty, and even the federal government as well. Pitching in. We don't know.
The federal government could be done quickly. It's just about.
It could be. I'm not saying it could, but we just don't know if they buy into it.
That's right. That's
okay. Right. All right. So you do have your ideas and plans on GRS there.
Yeah. And so look, I'm not talking about increasing contributions for anybody.
We're
not talking about cutting benefits for anybody. The benefits are, they're so low. you're talking about people getting $2,000 or $3,000 a month after all this work, not adjusted for inflation. You know, in the States, they'd be getting twice as much, right?
Yeah.
And they would have been getting twice as much pay all these years. So you know, all the ideas to fix things that I've seen in 15 years are trying to get money from people who have the least. They don't go after anybody with money. We go after the retiree who's trying to live on $3,000 a month and cut him down to $2,000, or who's living on $2,000 and cut him down to $1,500, or the government employee making, what are they, $35,000 a year?
Yeah.
We're trying to increase his contribution. He can't live, and now we're increasing his WAPA bill, and food prices are going up. Like, we just keep going after people who have nothing and just squeezing them harder and harder. That's just not what I do. I don't think that way. Okay, I come up with other things that I think will work, or I wouldn't be running for office. Here's the proposals are all right here. Okay, the bullet points, and they're on my website in detail. And that's why I'm doing this, to put these out as something.
What about the plans that some of the other candidates have floated, 401k? What are your thoughts on a 401k tier situation?
Yeah, that means you'll take money out of your paycheck. I don't know how you're going to live. You're going to take more money out of your paycheck. You put it in your own savings account. Okay, you don't have to pay taxes on it, so the government's going to lose some money, but that's nice. And it's going to pay you a lot less at the end than the retirement benefit in the GERS. It's going to pay you maybe a third as much. Okay, so we're just like, it's a way to squeeze money out of these people trying to get by here.
Aren't certain 401ks based on market reaction?
Oh, well, if you put it in the stock market.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you just put it in fixed income and bonds, sure, you can take stock market risk. Then if it goes down, you could have nothing. So it's depending how, but if you look at it on a risk-adjusted spread, the GERS puts its money in stocks and bonds also. So it's the same thing.
It's the same thing. I think they get about 7% return on their portfolio.
So far, yeah. That's good. Yeah, they've done very well.
That's a solid return.
You won't hear me complaining about the returns. That's not the problem.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We've spent a lot of time there on GRs. I feel like you've laid out your plans. You've spoken about the educational system.
Yes.
And talk about that a little bit, and how you want to give each student $10,000. You want to speak about that plan?
I like to call it the $10,000 scholarship proposal. And what it does is it makes all the private schools free. So if your child gets into a private school, there's no charge, just like the public schools. So why do we want to do this? There's a couple of reasons. So I think if you look at the parents here, almost any parent that can afford to send their child to private school takes them out of the public school and sends them. And it's not very many anymore because nobody can afford to do it. So it winds up being the children from the wealthy families go to the private schools, and the children from lower income families don't. It's not about which students are the most qualified or anything else or the most talented. It's about who has the most money. So we give the best education to the students with the most money. I think that's against every value we have here in the USVI. It's certainly against my values. And if your value is different, if you think the students with the most money should get the best education, vote for somebody else, because I don't. I think the children are the future. We've got to take what talent we have and give them the best education we can. Okay, and allocating by money is to me just wrong. So once all the students are funded and all the private schools are free, then they get in by merit. So if you have a private school for children who are good at math, the children, the best math students will go, whether they have any money or not. Or if you have a school for the arts that's in music, children who are most talented in music will go, whether they have any money or not. And if you just have a regular school, that school will try and get the best children it can. And so, but let me start with let me jump over to the monetary side, because we're in a financial crisis.
Yeah.
All right. So we spend about $200 million, more than $200 million a year educating our students.
Federal monies,
including federal money.
Most of it federal monies.
Well, I think 160 or 70 is us.
Yeah.
Another 40 or 50 is federal.
Isn't it more than that? Okay.
It's close.
It's
whatever
close,
it is. Okay, but the total, because it's all transferable.
Yeah.
And there are only now a little over 10,000 students last year. So and the number used to be $20,000 per student. Now maybe because we're saving money because of the hurricane or something, it's more or less. But I'm going to use the number 20,000 just to make the point. Okay, and $200 million just to make the point. It's a little more, but we'll use $200 million. The private schools, Free Will Baptist, Saint, the Catholic schools, and they all charge less than that. Okay, and even the most expensive school, the Good Day School, the Country Day Good Hope.
Good Hope Country Day.
They charge 14 or 15,000 at some grades, but that's because so many students are getting in free. Because they are trying to make it more, progressive. But on average, if they had $10,000 per student, if everybody was paying, they told me they'd be fine. If they had 500 students and they had $5 million, they said they could run their school just fine. They'd be happy. Okay, and that's the most expensive one. All right, so we've got the government is spending $200 million to educate students in public schools, where if they sent them all to private schools and the government paid for it, and they all had private school educations. I know there aren't enough schools, but we'll get to that. The government would only be spending $100 million. We'd be saving $100 million a year.
So what are we saying? What are we doing with the public schools?
Well, if nobody wants to go there, then everybody would go to private. But I don't think that'll happen. So I'm just saying.
Okay, so we're shutting down the public schools?
Yeah, well, we're doing that anyway. First of all, half of them aren't even open. We're in modulars with double sessions, so we don't even have public schools.
And is this, a referendum or indictment of sorts on our public school system?
Let's say it this way. We got parents working 1, 2, and 3 jobs to get their children out of public schools into private schools. So what do they say? They're the ones who are voting. They're voting with their lives.
But
if they don't want, nobody's going to be forced to go to a private school. If they think the public school is better, they stay there.
But what if your idea gains traction and you have more leaving the public school system and going to the private school, where it becomes to a point where it doesn't make sense to maintain the public school system? What happened to those who want to stay?
So if there are no students left?
Well, not none at all.
Yeah.
But what if the ratio doesn't make sense to keep those who are in the public school there?
Well, even if there's 1,000 students in a public school, it'll make sense. You don't have to have a great big school. We got little modulars, but you just scale it back to whatever the demand is. Because some people may be thinking, well, you know what? I really love the public school system. I have spoken to some educators. Yeah.
And Senator Cudvillo, we've spoken about this.
Yeah.
And he prides himself in, I think he sent his kids to the public school system,
yeah,
and believes it's a good system.
Yeah, and that's fine.
Some may think that the idea is, you're trying to get everybody off of the public school and into private.
No, if people want to send their students to the public school, that's fine. I don't have any problem with that. And there are communities that are much smaller than that have public schools. There's no minimum size for a public school. And don't forget, as all the students go to private schools, the 200 million now, let's say half of them go to private schools. So now 50 million will go to supporting the private schools. Now you've got 150 million, but only 5,000 students. Now you've got 30,000 per student left in the public school. So the more you send, the more money you have left for the public school, if that's where people want to be.
Okay, so that is something.
So so where do our public schools rate nationally in terms of education? Pretty low, right?
Yeah, they're struggling.
And it's been like that. I got here 15 years ago. It's probably gotten worse, right? Okay, so I'm not saying there aren't good spots. I know there are, and I've met students who intern in my office from public schools. They're excellent.
That's what I'm saying.
I'm not saying, but I don't. And if there are parents who think they're better off there than in one of the private schools, that's fine.
But isn't that
Let me add one more thing. Okay, I've talked to pastors, a lot of them, and the ones
of course.
Yeah. And I say, okay, if you would be able to open up your own school, your church could have a school, and if you had 30 students, you would get $300,000, and you'd still have to have standards, curriculum, the whole thing. If that was possible, when would you open up a school, and how long would it take? And every one of them says, we'll do this tomorrow. Okay, so if you go through all the churches, they want to have their own schools. But
why not, as governor of the territory, why not work on making the public schools better? You said you've been, of course, you've been there for a while, 15 years, and they haven't worked. Our standards are not that high. Why not work towards raising the standards and getting the schools accredited, as compared to saying, let's go to the private school system? Sure,
but if you ask me how I'm going to fix the GRS, I'm a finance person. I can give you a dollar and cents answer.
Right.
What am I going to say about the public schools? Put more money in? We all know that's not the answer. Okay, we have a major organizational problem in the public schools. We've gone to the outside and hired commissioners with multiple PhDs and everything else, and it just keeps getting worse. It's not like nobody has tried to do this for 15 years. I don't want another year of students lost because, oh, we're going to try this or try that. If we can, at some point the children come first. We've lost 2 generations of children while I've been here.
Are we giving up on the public school system here?
No, it's still there. Okay, people, it's going to transfer out, and you know what? Sometimes when something like this happens, public school gets better. It might not. It's not going to happen magically.
Is there a model elsewhere where what you're proposing has been implemented?
The answer is no, because we have a unique advantage. In the States, the private schools cost twice as much as the public schools. So if they tried to do this, the government would have to spend twice as much money. Okay, we had somebody, one of the senators was pushing charter schools here.
Right.
It doesn't work because you have to give them the same money you're spending in public schools. So if you're spending $20,000 in public schools, you got to give the charter school $20,000. They only need 10. That's why they're all down here. Yeah, we want to open up a charter school down here. Yeah. Okay, they're just trying to take advantage and game the system. Our private schools cost half as much, so we can do this. We can save money by putting our children through the private schools. Up north, the private schools cost twice as much, so they can't do that. They'd have to spend twice as much to do it. We have a unique situation here.
What do you think, Warren, is the issue with the public school system? And before you answer that, I want to speak on what you said relative to the pastors you've spoken to, and how virtually all of them have said, yes, if this is available, we'll open it tomorrow. But these private institutions are getting teachers who are working in the public school system to come and work with them.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it creates a teacher shortage because you have smaller classrooms.
Right.
So you will need more teachers. It's good for the teachers.
I'm saying
it's a big benefit.
But what do you suspect, and education is part of your platform, what do you feel or think is wrong with our educational system here, since you're proposing this?
There are a lot of elements, but one important element is parental involvement. And what this does is it changes the whole dynamic of parental involvement, because all of a sudden all these cute little boys and girls have $10,000 checks pinned to their little collars. And so now every headmaster and every pastor is coming to you, the dad and the mom, saying, gee, isn't little Johnny cute? He'd really be good at my school. We need to talk about getting him into my school. And if he's in and he's having trouble, they're going to talk about what we have to do to keep him in school, because that's how they keep their money. Right? So what you've done is you've made the children valuable. Today the children are not valuable, and they feel it, and they know it. They're being treated like an expense that has to be dealt with. We don't know how we're going to do it. This makes children valuable. People are competing to get the children, and they're competing with the parents. So now the parents are valuable. You've got 3 or 4 children, all of a sudden you're valuable. You've got $30,000 or $40,000 for some school. They're interested in you. They're calling you Mr. and Mrs. instead of turning their backs, right? Okay, it turns the whole social dynamic around to the way it used to be and the way we'd like it to be.
So at the end of the day here, okay, so we've spoken about this plan. Let's move on to something else, and again looking at your proposals here. And we wrote about this on the consortium as well. You've spoken about the Mosler bonds. Right, and the Mosler bonds, something that you said you proposed to the local government, you proposed it to Greece as well.
Yes.
And nobody bought into it. And you haven't. Have you heard from the local government on the Mosler bonds?
No. Greece was during the crisis.
I remember.
And what happened in Greece is the European Central Bank financed them at like 0% rate or something. So they didn't need it.
Right.
But that was their backup plan.
You haven't heard about the from the local government?
From the USVI?
Yeah.
No, nothing.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. No. In fact, they didn't understand it.
Okay.
Because the governor, I saw him at No Bones, and he yells across the bar to me, "Hey, Mosler, you sold any of those Mosler bonds yet?" It's like, I'm not selling Mosler bonds. That's just the name of a security that you would
sell.
Some
people actually think it's Warren Mosler's bonds or something. No, it's just the name.
It's just the concept.
A concept of it. Okay. Yeah. So talk about that concept and why you feel it would get us out of the situation in relative to our bonds and our junk rating status.
In today's market, the best way to do it is with the federal government that I described. If the federal government wouldn't do it, then this becomes a backup. Okay, which I'm not, because things have deteriorated since then. It would be more difficult and more problematic, but it's still a possibility. So, but the same concept can be used at WAPA to refinance WAPA at lower rates. Okay, and so one of those, and I'm not trying to duck your question on Mosley bonds, but this will help understand it. Last year, WAPA borrowed $85 million to buy new generation equipment for St. Thomas. You remember that? And it was the right thing to do because they will save more than that. And they paid 15% interest on those bonds.
Heavy
to borrow
interest.
that money, yeah. But we'll save more than that on fuel and whatnot, and so it's worth it. But it would have been a lot better if we could had a lower interest rate.
Yeah.
So I talked to people one. I said, have you ever looked at payment in kind bonds? And the people on the board I talked to said, like, no, what are those? And I explained that it's a bond where you borrow the $85 million and you promise to pay principal and interest, but if you can't, then the holder of those bonds can use the bonds to pay his WAPA bill. So if you don't pay him, he doesn't pay you. And he gets his money back by not paying you. And he can, these are freely transferable, like $20 bills, so the banks could use them to intercept all the WAPA bills if they wanted to, okay, to get it. And so it takes the risk away from investors. Now, I could argue there's not much risk anyway because WAPA is going to pay the 15%. But with these bonds, it would only be 5%. So it would have saved us $8.5 million the first year just in interest. Plus the structuring would have been cheaper.
And what if WAPA can't pay?
Yeah.
What you just explained happens.
Yeah.
But what happens to WAPA's operations?
Okay, then WAPA is going to lose revenue. But what happens if WAPA can't pay the bonds it has now? What happens to its operations? It's the same thing.
It's different in the sense that WAPA's bond rating goes to junk status, which I mean it's basically.
But they still have to pay the bonds.
They have to pay the bonds, but
so that's money going out of WAPA, right?
It is different in that. At the end of the day, WAPA could probably pay its employees. It's as compared to the.
So you say WAPA could not pay its bonds if it didn't want to. It could default.
Exactly. It could default. And I'm not saying but it could if the decision comes between paying its bonds and paying its employees.
Right.
With your solution, however, it has no choice.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So that's a problem, isn't it?
Yeah. No, it's not a problem. Okay, because WAPA has no choice anyway. They're obligated to raise rates and pay their bondholders. They're obligated to pay the money either way.
They are obligated.
Okay.
But if it comes, so the same situation with the local government.
Yeah.
When they basically put a noose around.
So what you're saying is, we're going to try and borrow money in the normal way from people who lend us money. and what we're going to say is to them, the reason we're doing it this way is because that way we have the option to never pay you.
No.
Well, that's what you just said.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if it comes down to a critical situation, I'm not saying WAPA should default. But I'm saying if WAPA has to default, because if it becomes between the bondholders, so WAPA will not be the only institution that has done this. It's happened over the states.
Yeah.
WAPA would rather pay its employees than the bondholders. I'm not saying it's right.
In that case, WAPA's rates would go up, right? And so in the case that people aren't paying their electric bills with cash, what happens? WAPA's rates go up. It's the same thing to the penny. The rates have to go up either way.
Okay.
To pay for WAPA's bonds. WAPA's bonds come out of the ratepayer.
And you said that
and they have a link. The bondholders have a link to the ratepayer the same either way.
Right. And then you
But
said
see, the difference is with the normal bonds, if you don't pay, they have to chase you for money.
Yeah.
With these bonds, they don't have to chase you. But either way, WAPA has to do the same thing. They have to raise the rates to pay it.
Right.
Okay. So and now look, if you're saving $8.5 million a year, your ability to pay is much higher. Okay, so the likelihood of defaulting on a 15% bond is much higher than on a 5% bond.
Right.
So you're cutting down your overhead dramatically.
You said
and you're going to pay it anyway.
You said it would be a similar situation with the government situation.
Yeah, so what the government can do with a Mosley bond, and again, you got to review this, is these bonds look like normal bonds, but they say if the government doesn't pay, you can take it off your taxes.
Oh, taxes, right. That's about $300 million that the BIR collects in taxes.
Right, but you wouldn't take it the first year. You don't have to take it the first year, and it's only if the government doesn't pay. Now, when you're issuing Mosley bonds, they're easier to issue, so you do what the governments always do: they refinance to pay. Number one. Number two, you make them bank eligible. It's not hard to do because they don't have a default clause. It doesn't say in the event of default, because they can't default. It says in the event that they don't pay, you can use them to pay taxes. Right. So now with no default, they become risk-free for the banking system. And I understand the regulators might need to sign off on it, but when I've talked to people in the banks, they thought they would. because by all definitions, they're risk-free for banks. So banks are what are called leverage players. They take in deposits, and they pay their depositors a certain interest rate, okay? And they make a spread, and that spread determines their profits. So they might pay the depositor 2%, they make loans at 4%, they have a 2% profit, right? So if they have a risk-free investment like Treasury securities, they can work for very small margins because they can make, like, you know, their ratio, I don't want to get too complicated, but they have stockholders that put money in.
Right.
For every dollar a stockholder puts in, the bank can make $10 worth of loans.
But isn't it is the same concept whereby if the government isn't able to pay the $300 million that BR collects, it loses it.
Right.
And that's critical to the government operations.
Yes, but if it doesn't pay, it's losing it anyway because it has to pay. Okay, and federal government will come in, shut it down, and make it pay. I mean, it's going to pay one way or the other.
Would you? Are those still part of your plan?
Yeah. Well, no, because it's a backup part. But the thing is, there's one more thing. Let me finish on this banking thing. If I'm a bank and I have these bonds that pay me 1 or 2% more than my deposits, the government of Virgin Island bonds, and the Virgin Islands doesn't pay me, but I can still accrue the interest, and I'm still getting the profit. Why would I use them? Why would I turn them in and get the money? I'd lose all my profits. Right. Okay, so if they're structured properly, the banking system will never turn them in because it's their source of accrued profits. You don't give them any cash; they get to report profits to their shareholders. You know, at the spread, and as long as they're not at risk, which they aren't, because they can use them for taxes anytime they want. Maybe they use a couple just to show the regulators it works. Right. They don't want to turn it in.
And so have you spoken to banking institutions as to whether they would implement such or buy into such a structure?
Only on a personal level. I haven't made a presentation to the board. Okay. But I've known people who've run banks and asked them about it. And, you know, I asked, would you buy Virgin Island bonds? And they say, no. I say, well, how about if in the event that they didn't pay, you could take them off your taxes? They go, sure, how many you got? Because they know they can leave them there forever, accrue the profits, and it works. And then that drops our interest rates way down. And they can be tax-free bonds, okay? So again, it drops our interest rates down to the 2.5% level, depending on maturity, okay? Okay, and it opens up financing. But I'm not here to open up markets to go into more debt, to get us deeper in debt, more trouble. Right. This is a way to refinance what we have, to cut our expenses so we can get out of this debt, okay? It's not about adding to it.
All right, let's talk about the
It's not some trick to...
Well, again, so good ideas as you've mentioned, but again, it's the implementation, and they haven't been tested.
Yeah. At all. No, well, payment in kind bonds are common. They're all and federal government refinancing bonds is common. Mosler bonds have not been used, but governments use tax credits all the time, and it's just another way to use tax credits.
Let's talk about
tax credit financing is very common.
Let's talk about the economy.
The whole solar industry is financed with tax credits.
Okay, let's talk about the economy a little bit, Warren, and your plans for stimulating our economy. Of course, we know we've been stagnant for quite a while. It started during the 2008 recession. Hovenza complicated it even more, and we've been struggling to get on our footing here. What is part of the Mosler plan that would help grow our economy, do you believe?
Right. So for St. Croix, non-stop flights back and forth to New York. We had those before Hurricane Hugo. We had a good economy. We haven't had them since. We haven't had that kind of an economy since. So many people are telling me non-stop flights to New York is a way to open up the St. Croix economy.
Non-stop flights to New York? Yeah. On a daily basis, or how often would those take place?
I like to see it on a daily basis. It might start off 4 days a week and then move up. Okay, we'll have to see what the demand is. I've been told there's a lot of demand, but we're going to have to guarantee the seats. It's going to cost us some money, and then we're going to get it back from tourist revenues.
So this is what I want to know. Have you done your analysis and research on that as to what would make the non-stop flights generate revenue to the territory, aside from people being here? How does that work?
Well, that's how it works. People being here, staying at hotels, going out to eat, spending food, paying grocery receipts, tax on everything.
You've done an analysis as to...
And, I talked to people at the Port Authority to see what tourists spend on average and how many we would need and how many empty seats before we break even and that type of thing. And it's reasonable. You know, in worst case, we might lose $1 or $2 million if we don't get enough, but it doesn't seem likely, and it's aggressive, but it's not a lot of money in the scheme of things.
But it is not something you've really looked at in an overall sense and done some research.
I can't. I don't have the numbers. You know, I don't have the research that Port Authority does. I can't do that, and I can't talk to the airlines about what they would want to do this. I can't represent the Virgin Islands on that. So I don't have the ability to do this.
You don't think you could have done some personal research and find out certain numbers at all? No, like your own private research?
I don't do research, but I do calculations. I do back of the envelope calculations. And, you know,
because again, we're trying to grow, and you know, we're trying to grow the economy. We're trying to lift up the territory, and as a gubernatorial candidate, you know.
But if we have to buy 100 seats a week, pay for 100 seats a week because they're not full, it's $50,000 a week. You know, if it's $500 a seat.
So what if that doesn't pan out? What are your other plans relative to our territory?
But number one, that's something I want to try.
You want to try it
right away? Okay, first thing, and the other thing we have is the ability. We have, again, we keep our own income taxes, much like the GERS. So we have an advantage in a lot of areas over other localities that don't keep their own income taxes. So, for example, people have talked about sports tourism. Well, I talk about it a different way. So you've got a basketball team like the Spurs, okay, and their payroll is, I was told, $115 million a year, which means they pay $1 million a week in federal income taxes. So if those players are down here training, they're working, they're paying $1 million a week in federal taxes, that's our money. The IRB, us will transfer that money to the IRB if we get the correct forms filled out. It's not federal government's money. All right, that money could be used. We can work with the team and say, look, you're going to be down here 12 weeks training or 16 weeks training. We have 12 or $16 million here. We want to use this money to support the team while it's here. You can use it to build a stadium. You can use it for whatever you want, but we want to have this available to you, or some portion of it, 75% or something. Okay, now we're competing to get this training center in a way that no other locality can. Okay, and if they say, yeah, we'll sign a 10-year contract to do that, now we've got $160 million guaranteed that can be used to fund the stadium or whatever we want, right?
So that would be one of your plans?
And we get, well, what I'm saying is by doing this, the answer is yes, this would be one of my plans. And we have a lot of pro athletes down here, and ex-pro athletes, some very good basketball players who are very well connected, that are now looking out for the Virgin Islands, and I think they'd be happy to go to the team owners and say, here's an opportunity that works for all of us. All right. Okay, it's a win-win for both sides.
Again, thank you for joining us. In the first hour, we discussed GRS, Mr. Mosley's plans for the economy as well, and discussed some issues relative to our bond and our junk status. We spoke of the Mosley bonds and whatnot, and we did mention some stuff about the economy. Now let's continue there a little bit. Okay. You said you believe your plan for the direct flights from New York to St. Croix would estimation of $50 million a year is what you said?
Gross revenue, something. Yeah, not a lot, but it's something.
But again, we don't have solid numbers on that as of yet. You're just throwing that out there?
Yeah. In other words, you assume a certain number of passengers coming, staying a week, spending $500 a day, $200 for the hotel room, and $200 for food per couple or something like that. And you come up with numbers in that ballpark. Okay. And if you have more flights, it'll be higher, and if you have fewer flights, it'll be lower. And that's not a big number but it's a good start. And for a place like St. Croix, it adds a lot of life.
You mentioned for the island of St. Croix, you would not necessarily like to see the development of new big hotels. Not even an additional one.
We could. I mean, the ones we have aren't doing so well that
well, I mean, if you're going to add new flights to the territory.
Yeah, but what we have is, look at all the FEMA people and government people we had come into St. Croix. There were thousands, and they all found places to stay. We have a lot more guest houses and villas than you imagine. And so I'd like to see that market filled up, and I'd like to see us specialize with that type of tourism, so that we'll attract those types of people who want to walk around the streets and see that. So if you look at a place like Nantucket, they don't have any massive hotels or anything like that. It's guest houses and some small hotels and boutique type of things, and they attract a certain tourist who wants that and is willing to pay a lot of money to have that. Same thing with cruise ships. Okay, right now we're actually in the process of moving Port Authority, commercial traffic to the South Shore. On the drawing board is plans to dredge Gallows Bay and bring in the 100 to 300 passenger cruise ships. And I think that would be ideal for Christian settings in St. Croix.
How do you feel the current governor has performed?
Not well enough for me to not run for office. Okay.
Well,
But if I thought he was doing well, I would be doing this.
so you don't think he's doing a good job?
Yeah, but I like to talk more about what I'm doing and what I could be doing rather than what he's done.
What would you have done differently during the storms as a governor?
During the storms, well, I don't like to second guess people during emergencies when things are happening. I wasn't on the inside of what was happening then, but my attitude towards people and what we're going through is not, well, it's going to get tough, and if you don't like it, you ought to leave. I mean, he just gave us the feeling the whole time that he didn't like us. And that's not how I do things.
You didn't like the idea, you're saying you didn't like the tone of the president?
Yeah. Well, where are you sleeping without the Ritz? What did he tell you?
Well, I can't remember.
You can't remember.
I'd have to go. I can't. I would have to go back and look at the tape.
Yeah, something about with your mother or something.
Oh, well, that wasn't me.
That was another reporter.
Yeah. It wasn't a reporter. It was something
some
online.
question. Yeah, so that type of thing.
So you don't like that type of thing?
No, I mean, people are, to get those kinds of answers from somebody, and to, what kind of message are we sending our school children when they don't have school supplies and the governor buys himself new cars to drive around on both islands? And when I ask kids about that, they're sensitive. They know. They see that happening. And they know that in the eyes of the adults, they're just expenses. They're worthless. They're in the way. And so then it all starts there. It all starts with setting a good example. I kind of joke, but I say, look, when I get in, there's immediately going to be 6 government cars up for sale on eBay.
You're going to sell the cars?
And I'm going to drive my own car, and I'll have, my wife drive me around. I'm not going to buy a car.
What about the protocol of the office, security and all of that?
Yeah, well, it's going to be minimal, okay? And there's not going to be any trappings of, royalty or anything like that. That's not the kind of person I am. And I'm doing this as a matter of conscience. I can't sleep at night spending money on my trappings of royalty when everybody's suffering and people are hurting and scrapping by to make a living. I just can't do that. It's not in me to do that. Okay. It's not about me and what I'm going to do.
Let's talk about healthcare, Warren.
Yeah.
And another major challenge in the territory.
Yeah.
We are hearing stories all the time about both our hospitals.
Yeah.
Basically, if you need anything done, you got to be flown out of the territory.
Yeah.
And so, what has been part of your strategy? Again, you're seeking the highest officer. What has been part of your strategy to help bring our healthcare system to where it needs to be?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we all know that it's nice to have a new building, a new hospital, but that's not going to change our quality of health care. Okay, you're still going to be waiting in the emergency 6 or 8 hours if something doesn't change in management. So that all has to be addressed. And we have good people who majored in public administration who know how to do this. There are hospital administrators who know how to do this. They're not getting the jobs. They're not being put in positions of responsibility. They don't have the respect of the people who work in the organizations. And when you have a public organization, the leadership has to have the respect of the people working there. They don't have to like them. It doesn't have to be their best friend, but they have to have the respect and feel that they're capable of doing a good job, or the morale breaks down and the whole thing falls apart. And we've got problems, or have had problems. Every time I mention the problems, I hear, oh, well, that's been fixed, this has been fixed, and then 6 months later it comes up again, right? We've had problems with billing, and we've had problems with machinery. I was just told there's only one monitor for emergency patients, so if you're in the hospital on the monitor and another emergency patient comes in, they got to take it away from you and give it to another. Nurses are telling me they carry their own thermometers because there aren't thermometers there for people.
It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad.
Yeah. And then but again, I'm relying on third-hand information. I don't have first-hand information when I get in there to do it. So, we have a management problem. We need to find the capable people and put them in positions of responsibility to do it. But they also have to be funded.
That's what I was about to say. How do we fund those positions?
And I have to tell another little story about this and use round numbers just to make the point. Again, remembering we keep our own income taxes. So the way a hospital works is, this is just for an example, it's not actual numbers, but the hospital has patients who come in, and then they bill the insurance companies. And let's say they bill the insurance companies for $10 million. And then they have to pay all the employees, and it's $10 million. So now the hospital doesn't have any money left over for Band-Aids and to fix the monitors and to fix the air conditioning in the operating room, which goes out, and then we don't have an operating room, and we lose enormous revenues. Okay, because it took $10 million in and paid it for employees, there's nothing left. Okay, it's
Right.
well, when you pay the employees $10 million, again, maybe $2 or $3 million comes right back to the government in taxes. You give them 10, they give you 2. The hospital is the government. So we actually only paid them 7 or 8. And we took the other 2 or 3 million as a profit, put it into the government, and spent it somewhere else.
So it seems as if the theme, a general theme,
Yes.
as part of what you're proposing as your package,
Yes.
includes that differentiation we have
Yes.
with the U.S. government, where
Yes.
we basically get the taxes, right?
Right. It's a recurring theme that we
Right.
can use to our advantage.
Okay, but then those funds you're mentioning, those taxes, are going elsewhere in the
Yes,
government
which I just said that. Yeah.
to do other things.
Yes.
So what happened to the?
So the hospital says, "Oh, gee, the hospital's running at a loss. It's not bringing in enough money to buy Band-Aids." Sure, it is. It's brought in an extra 2 or 3 million to buy Band-Aids. We just used it somewhere else. Two separate problems.
But, no, but we used it somewhere else. What if that somewhere else we used it? Because it's not really the hospital's money. It's the government's money. The 3 million extra you're talking about.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yeah, but
it's the government's money.
But the government has a choice. The hospital, it came in from the insurance companies for servicing the patients. It's there to service the patients, to pay the nurses and the doctors, and to pay for their Band-Aids and to pay for the WAPA bill. But we didn't use it for that. The government's run up a $40 million WAPA bill it hasn't paid because it used the money somewhere else. It's the same problem, okay?
But I'm saying...
So let me identify the problem first. And then I've already located 60, 70, $170 million we can save other places to take care of the government, so the government doesn't have to steal from the GERS, doesn't have to steal from the hospital or borrow or confiscate, whatever you want to call it. Okay, but when we talk about our medical center, let's look at how it's doing on its own, and that the problem with the medical center is not that it isn't generating enough funds to have a good, high-quality medical center, is that the government's confiscating those funds before they get applied. That's the point I'm trying to make, that the medical sector itself and how to enhance that. Okay, so let me just continue on this for a minute. All right, so similarly, we have radiology and we have Plesson and we have all these satellites that make a lot of money, millions of dollars a year. And in the States, that's money lost to the state hospital because it's made by private people. Okay, but here, those satellites making millions of dollars are paying millions of dollars of taxes back to the government. So it's not lost the way it is in the States. So the consultants from the States say, look, you've got to bring radiology back into the hospital. You've got to bring this back into the hospital so you can capture those revenues. We are already capturing those revenues and using them somewhere else, understand, okay? But what we need to do is increase the satellites around the hospital, medical services, and do a lot more with those. Let those people bill. They do it better than we do. Let them make their money, let them pay their employees, and then we'll get half of it back from taxes. And then we'll be much better off.
Okay, so the idea here...
Yeah, the core model has got to be different here than in the States.
I got it, but so again, what people have to understand here is that central theme of what you offer...
It's going to recur.
The funds, however, the taxes, the government currently is using it somewhere else. And those places are very important places. Part of it is payroll. You understand?
Sure.
Because it's general fund funds.
And I'm replacing those.
How are you replacing them?
Well, we've had $60 million on interest we saved. We had $8.5 million we saved in WAPAs just on one small WAPA bill for their interest on that other thing. We have ultimately $100 million a year saving on our cost of education by funding the private structure rather than the public structure.
So you're gonna do those in tandem, all that work?
Everything has to start at once, and then they all have a certain time to take to get it done. Some things will happen in 30 days, some will happen in a year, some in 3 years.
You think senators would support the idea of the schools?
I'd like to think so, and they might not, but I can only do the best I can, right? I can come up with the ideas, I can show the logic, I can show how it benefits everybody, it benefits the senators, it benefits all the people, and they still might not want to do it. They might be in there to sabotage the Virgin Islands and make us worse. I don't know. It's possible.
I mean,
they might have some political agenda to get me out or something. I understand all that, but that's a different subject. That's a different matter.
I think if folk disagree, I don't think it's always to sabotage. But
yeah.
so again, going back to that idea here, a lot of your ideas, Warren, would depend on some
cooperative effort.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm going to work with the delegate. I'm going to work. When I go to the Senate, I don't go at the last minute like Lime Tree and drop it on them. When I first start, I go to them and say, look, here's where I'm going and here's what I'm talking about. And this is what I'm thinking. If you have any ideas, if you want to like tell me now so that when I talk to these people, I'll know how you're feeling about all these things. That's what I want. I want your input on it. I'm going to them regularly to do that. So, I've managed large companies. I do these things as a cooperative effort. I go to the delegate to Congress who has 18 slots for employees and say, look, there's a lot of grant writers we need down here to comply with this federal money, but they live in Washington. They don't want to come down here.
So state your plan to better our healthcare system here again?
Yes. We have to provide incentives to expand the satellite systems around the hospital. So if we're building a new hospital, we don't build it so everything's in the hospital as part of the government hospital. We build it kind of like a shopping mall, where you have the hospital and then you have the pharmacy and the lab, and they're all privately owned, and they're all doing the best they can, and we're getting half their income through the tax system to fund the medical sector. And then we have a properly funded medical sector, and we can still confiscate money and put it somewhere else. I'm not saying we can't do that.
I don't think it's confiscated money. I think the governor is getting its fair share of taxes and it gets to do what it wants with it.
I know, but the money, when you do public accounting in like all the world agencies, if the government pays you something and you give them money back, they don't see that as a profit that they made. They see that as a net payment. If I give you $10 and you give me $2, the way you account for that properly is that I gave you $8. You don't say, oh no, I gave you 10 and then I made a $2 profit, now I'm going to spend that somewhere else. You don't do that. Okay, we do that.
Okay.
And I know that. But so I'm not like coming up with some strange system. I'm just, we've already got this strange system. I'm coming up with a real system. And when you do it the right way, then it's more obvious as to what's working and what isn't working.
Okay.
We used to look at it now and we say the hospital isn't working because when the hospital pays the employee 10, and they give 2 back, the government takes the 2, then it doesn't work. Well, okay. But if the hospital gives the employee 10 and gets 2 back, we say, all right, you gave the guy 8, then it works. Okay, so the hospital itself, without the outside interference of whatever you want to call
it's our system.
Reallocate. I understand, but what I'm saying is we have a systematic issue here that we can change. Okay. It's the nature of the system, like the accounting system in this case.
Part of the equation, if your administration, if you were to embark on this, would be where would the government get the other funds if you're going to restructure the system?
Sure.
And we're talking about probably tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars.
Hundreds of millions.
Yeah.
And I've done that, and I'm going to keep doing it as we keep talking. This only gets better.
Okay. All right. Let's go.
Look, this is a big problem that's been going on for a long time. This can go on for 2 or 3 hours to go through all these details, which we don't have.
Right. But let's
they're
go
all there. I assure you, they're all there.
Let's go.
Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this. I'm not here to just make a big show, win the job, and have my wife drive me around for 4 years waving to people. That's not what I want. I've got a comprehensive vision and plan that can work.
Okay.
Will it? Can I guarantee that it'll work? No, but I can present it if it makes sense and you want to see it tried. Then I'm asking for your vote. If you'd rather not, I respect that. I
want to go to small business in a little while, but let's go to our structural deficit. So you wanted to make a point before I go there?
Yeah. So one of the things I started talking about before the break was with our new electrical equipment, we have a low marginal cost of power. Okay, we're not talking about avoided cost, we're talking about marginal cost. When I asked the people at WAPA what's their marginal cost, they didn't know because nobody's ever used that number because it didn't apply. But it does apply in this case because we can then have an industrial park at St. Croix where we have all, down in the Renaissance area and the Ovensa area, where we offer low-cost electricity to companies that will move here to do business. Okay, and there are some companies that use enormous amounts of electricity, like bottling companies. So if we can sell that, if we're the lowest cost power provider, which we can be with this equipment, then we can attract these businesses and get all kinds of other benefits and increase the general fund through the rest of their tax revenues that they're going to have to pay anywhere. So if we produce power for 10 cents a kilowatt and sell it to them for 15, we're going to make a 5-cent profit. All right. And that money is then profit for the government, profit for WAPA that helps bring down the cost for the rest of us. And let me give you the general concept, okay? WAPA's overhead is about $150 million a year. And all the users pay for that. It gets divided up among everybody who uses as a WAPA bill.
Right.
So if everybody leaves the grid except for you, do you know how much your bill is?
Right.
$150 million.
It's a high bill, yeah.
You know, even with payments, that's going to be hard for you to make it. Okay, so what we need to do is have as many people on the grid so we can spread that out. So right now we sell 71 megawatts of power. We have to get that up to 250.
Well, so the governor and even WAPA is on a contrary trail right now.
Yeah, that's what this whole vision thing's about.
So they're speaking of getting more people off the grid in a buyback system. Yeah. So it kind of goes against what you're saying there.
Exactly, and that's why another reason. That's why I'm presenting this. It is different. It's totally different. They missed the point. And I've talked to people at WAPA, the financial people, and they couldn't agree more. We just got to get the volume up to spread out the fixed costs. Okay, and so this is one way to do it.
So how about the idea of solar energy and getting people on their own and you're not for that buyback system?
All right,
it's contrary to what you're proposing.
Yeah, we don't have. It's worse than that. We don't have the right equipment to make it worthwhile. Right now, we will have on St. Thomas. We don't yet, but it's there. It's not up and running yet. Maybe in December, they said. But in St. Croix, for example, what we have is, I'm going to simplify it. Let's just say we have 2 generators. One that runs on propane or diesel, depending on who they can pay or they can't pay, right? But it burns fuel.
Right.
Okay, and it gets hot.
Right.
If you touch it, you're going to burn yourself, okay?
Of course.
So what they do is they use it to boil water. Okay, not to make tea, but they boil that water, and that water, the steam, runs another generator that's smaller, maybe half the size. So they might run, the fuel might produce 20 megawatts of power on the one generator, then the steam, the weight that ordinarily would just go in the air, it's very clever, use that to boil water, and you run another generator that produces 10 megawatts, so now you have 30. Okay? Okay, well now the sun comes out, and we've got this new solar thing here that Richard Branson's company just bought, and it's producing 5 megawatts. And so, but the island only needs 30 megawatts of power. People have their lights on and their washing machines. They only need 30. And we had 20 and 10. We were doing just fine. Well, now they're producing 5. So we have to shut down something. Well, you can't shut down the one burning fuel that's hot, because if it gets cold, the other one shuts off. So you shut down the one that's running on the steam, which costs nothing to run. It costs like a penny a kilowatt to run, because it's not burning any fuel. It's just using the heat from the first one. And so we save nothing. We're still using the same amount of fuel, propane or oil for the first one. The second one, we just let more heat go up in the air and don't use it, and use only half as much. And we pay those guys 15 cents a kilowatt for their electric power. And we pay a guy, 40 cents a kilowatt for the electric power he's getting off his roof, and we're not saving any money on fuel. We're just shutting the steam thing down. Okay, this makes like no sense at all.
Right. So you're planning on getting more people part of it as well. Okay, so let's move. I wanted to get to business, your major businessman in the territory, and I want to get to that. But before we go there, let's speak about the structural deficit of the government. It is now over $200 million annually, a structural deficit. There must be some austerity action that has to be taken to breach that annual budget deficit. What would your administration do to help bridge that gap?
Okay, well, what I'm doing initially is I'm hoping to increase revenues. And if we can't increase revenues fast enough, what we need to have is like a clear path to increasing revenues. So I just showed you approximately $270 million of revenue increase. It won't happen all in the first day, right? And so, but that would go a long way. Now, and these other things.
This takes time, part of this is.
It takes time, I know.
Part of this is.
We have an urgent problem.
Right.
Okay. And there are, other things, that we can do to address these things. So, for example, when the federal government refinances all our bonds, they don't need the reserve fund anymore. Okay, so that money could be used to get us through the next year if we had to.
But what if they don't?
If they don't,
what is the backup there? What if the federal government decides we don't want no part of this?
Okay,
because we have to find the funds that theoretically that they'd help us with this. So what would you do?
Look, I can envision walking into the office on the first day There are 4 people there from the federal government. They're sitting at my desk. They say, oh, you go sit over there in the corner. We're in charge here. You're $200 million short. We're laying off half the workforce, and there's nothing you can do about it, which is pretty much what happened in Puerto Rico, okay? Right. And that's what would happen if that's the case. We don't know how bad it is. I think we're facing a scorched earth policy by the current administration that could be leaving us in that situation. I could be wrong. I think he has some vision that he might win, the governor, in which case he doesn't want to be in that situation. Right. Or maybe he doesn't care. I don't know. But you're exactly right. We could be in a situation where we can't pay our bills, all the checks bounce, before I even sit down. That's not until January. How do we get from here to January?
So what happens?
People don't get paid, people go home, and you're in a bad downward spiral.
I know what happens there, but so do you think any team, any gubernatorial team has a feasible plan that would get us out of this trouble if we can't bridge? Because we have no access to the bond market.
No.
None at all. So if the federal government doesn't buy into your plan, what happens? We go down?
Then it's up to them what they do. I think my plan is something that has the highest probability of them buying into it because it makes sense for them and it doesn't cost them anything. So Governor Mapp and the other candidates, let's say one of them wins, none of them adopts your plan. Yeah.
Are we in real trouble in January?
Yes. If not sooner. Unless something comes along I don't know about. Who knows what? Look, first of all, I'm totally transparent.
Right.
I'm going to have a CFO. The head of the OMB will be my CFO. I want a quality guy like Angel Dawson or somebody who's knows his stuff, a good banker. And we're going to have financial reports that show where everything is so people like you know the actual numbers. And when I see them, you're going to be looking at it just like this at the same time.
Right.
Okay, I'm a transparent person. Everything I've done, all my trading I did for 45 years, everybody knows what it is. When I was on Wall Street, when I ran my investment funds of multi-billion-dollar funds, everybody knew everything I did. And I've always lived my life transparently, and that's going to continue.
But you're saying here,
but it could be impossible. I don't disagree.
Do you? What about the refinery? What do you? The oil storage terminal? I think we're getting $11 million in taxes on that, and the revenue sharing deal with. For the refining, don't you feel like that's going to help with our economy? We're now seeing jobs. You don't think it will help with the structural deficit?
That money is part of the structural deficit. That's included in the structural deficit. Okay, now, we just gave away $400 or $500 million on this Lime Tree deal of future income, which would have helped. But now I don't have that. We have to face the facts here.
We are okay. So I have looked at some of your posts, and you said that basically the New Deal is a scam because we could have already or Lime Tree could have already refined in the first deal.
They were already proceeding to refine under the first contract.
Yeah, but there's something different though, because now you're BP, which I think it's BP. I know it's BP. That deal had to be separate because of the new player.
I wrote about that on July 3rd. Okay, when he first announced it, I said, look, this is, what they may be doing, because it's a private equity fund, that's what they do, is they might have needed to see a contract with the government first before they could raise investors.
Exactly.
And they didn't tell us that.
Well, let me ask you
this
it had
question.
to be different.
So let me ask you this as a journalist. So the Senate now knows that Lime Tree and the governor got together, conspired, so to speak, to lie to them about the contingency.
The $70 million.
The contingency before they were going to, on having an investor come in, okay, and about the idea that they weren't already refining under the original deal, okay, and because they were facing the 2020 deadline on deconstruction, okay. So they know they lied to them too, and that it was actually a payday loan that they were going for, right? Okay. And you saw Senator Roach talking to Val Collins and pinned him down on that lie. It was just a bold-faced lie. And do you hear any of them doing anything about it, taking any action? Do you hear any of the candidates, any of the senators saying, okay, we need to rescind this vote and do it again because it was fraud? It was fraud. It was clear fraud.
You would support a rescinding of the vote?
Sure. What I'm saying is they're not doing anything.
What would you do?
I would rescind the vote and reconsider the vote. But I'd do something more. If I were governor, I would have a little friendly chat with Lime Tree and I think we could come away with a very nice deal.
You're speaking about players like BP and multi-billion-dollar firms, and a deal that is already inked, that is already ratified, signed into law. You would go and bother that? People are working, people are seeing...
I think they would continue that, and I think they would pay full tax rates.
You think they'll pay full tax rates?
Yes.
Why would they pay full tax rates?
Because they did a no-no. And their little branch got caught doing a no-no, and the parent does not want to get involved in this.
They haven't, and I'm not supporting either side here, but they haven't quite admitted and said, you know what, we lied. Val Collins said he always represented that it was based on, and I don't, personally, I don't think he did, because, you know, but that's what he says. So it's not like anyone is admitting.
Yeah, but if you're a large corporation, that's more than enough that you don't want to be involved in that. And if one of your satellites, one of your branches does something like that, you want to just put together something that's good for both sides, where you can go back to your shareholders and say, look, we made a mistake, it's okay, doing this. So what was happening is they were already refining, and they were already paying the higher tax rates, right?
Okay, so let's
if they were happy with that then, they'd be happy with that now. Okay, they got something in a way they shouldn't have, so you give it back.
So let's get back on track here relative to...
Everybody shakes hands, and you go home, and we figure out ways for them to make even more money.
So bridging that deficit of $200 million here, you said part of the idea would be the federal government buying basically our debt. Yeah.
But that only breaches $60 million, right? But it's a start.
It's a start. Yeah. If it doesn't happen, you said, we could be facing a real problem come January, where a Promesa-like situation in Puerto Rico might happen here. Are there any other ways to solve this?
If not sooner.
If not sooner. Are there any other ways to solve this if the federal government decides they're not buying our debt?
There is a way to solve it, okay? And what we can do is we could sell tax credits as a last resort.
Okay.
But you don't do this, and you can't do it unless you have a clear plan to come out of the tunnel. You need light at the end of the tunnel, and real light.
Because even that is a risky deal too.
I'm not saying it isn't. I'm just saying if you're facing collapse anyway, you can package and sell tax credits, and you can get through, and it won't cost you a lot, and you can get through a short-term period. It's not in my plan, okay, but these are things I know. I've been around for a long time, and
because I feel it's a real serious situation we're talking about.
Yeah.
If an economist like yourself, you who've done this, you're a well-made man. You've done this for quite a long time.
Yeah.
You're saying, aside from your idea and strategy to have the federal government buy back our debt, which is, what is it, $2 billion now? And I'm not.
Right. But again, it doesn't. It's 1.2. But again, the rum cover.
The rum cover over. Yeah.
The rest of it we can do with.
The rest of it we could do
with Mosler bonds.
Right. But the 1.2, if they decide not to buy that from us, we're in trouble. You're saying.
That's one less thing we have going for us. That's a strong positive, and it's one less thing. And so. Look,
so are candidates selling us false hopes here? Is what you're saying? If you're saying we're in such trouble,
I haven't heard what they've said, and when I try to read what they say, I can't get anything out of it. I don't see any.
Well, most candidates talking about plans and how they're going to make the territory better. I think Brian Roach talking about for GRS additional rum companies for more of that rum cover over. And cannabis, marijuana, different plans they have. But you're saying without the federal government not coming in and saying, you know what, we're going to buy that debt from you to set you free, for lack of better words.
I don't know how bad the deficit is. That might be only a small part of it.
Right. But
you say 200 million. How do you know it's not 300?
Right. Well, 200 million, according to Julio Reimer, Office on Management and Budget Director. He said the structural deficit has grown. Last year it was like 112.
That's with the revenues that they're assuming. Those haven't come in.
Right. But it could be. You're saying it could be larger. Again, based on.
Let me give you some other things, because there's a lot of things we can do.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I talked about the basketball players coming down here, and we get to keep their income taxes.
Right.
This applies to anybody who comes in. A lawyer who comes in, makes $1 million here on a case while he's working here, pays taxes to Washington. We're supposed to get that money. That's VI's source income because he made the money here. It's our money. It belongs to us. There's no dispute. But he's got to fill out a form and right now and It goes to Washington, and then we get the money. Okay, this is like a large amount of money.
Are we getting those funds now?
No, we're getting some, maybe. Okay, and all the government workers and all the contractors, we're supposed to be getting all the income taxes off.
Is it a case of enforcement, or?
You know, I just had a friend of mine who works with one of the consultants who talked to them about it, and they didn't even want to talk. They didn't even care. So I don't know if we're getting it or not. And when we try to talk to the IRB to see if we're getting it or not, they won't give us an answer. So I don't know. But people I know who work there, you know, you talk to Lorenzo running with Melito Smith, smart kid, good guy. He said they used to get that when he worked for Department of Health, but nobody knows if they're still doing it. And the people who have been working there that I've talked to, the secretaries to the people who run the thing, they've never heard of it. They don't have any idea that we're getting this. So there's a couple of things there. It's our money, whether we get it or not. It's sitting there in Washington. They don't want it. It's our money. It doesn't belong to them. It's not anybody's taxpayer money. It's our taxpayer money. If we can estimate, if we can figure out this year it's $20 or $30 million, and then we can say, you know what, we've lost this money for the last 30 years. We say to Washington, send down somebody, an accountant, estimate how much is sitting there, and just give us a percentage of it, and we'll call it even, because they're not trying to cheat us out of it. And yes, we've had a problem with record keeping, but it doesn't, you know, you didn't buy the Virgin Islands to run it into the ground. It's our money. Give us a portion. That could be, it's probably at least $400 or $500 million that's sitting there. That's our money. Can I guarantee you get that? No. But I'm just saying, I've got a lot of things that I'm going to be trying desperately with to make this thing work. Okay, and I'll give you two of them, and I wrote a couple of more things down. We've got another major problem with this tax refunds. That's entirely illegal. We've got $60 million that they just told us that we haven't paid in tax refunds. It's probably higher. Okay, and they just announced they're giving out $2 million. It's like, so what? You can't do that. We can lose our taxing authority. The IRS can say, because it's technically the IRS owes that money, not the IRB. Washington owes that money. We're just a branch of them. We're operating on their behalf. If you don't pay your taxes, ultimately they can come after you, because when you pay your taxes, you've paid their taxes. Okay? How
do we solve that? So again, that money is...
That's what I'm saying. It's more than you're looking at.
So it's a major problem.
We've got a $40 million WAPA bill we haven't paid. So they're raising WAPA rates to pay it, which means they're using WAPA rates as a tax to pay the government's money. It's just the more you look, the worse it is. I've got all the tools. I know all the possibilities. I talk to other people who know things, and if somebody else thinks they can make a better effort, fine, but I haven't seen anybody who even can start. And what you need to do is establish a credible plan that can work over 5 years, that can then be funded. When the federal government goes into Puerto Rico and takes over, they say, what's your 5-year plan to get rid of this problem? If they had one, the government would fund it. But it's got to be credible. Okay, and there's nobody, I've got a credible plan that will grow us out of this thing. And there is a chance that the federal government really has no choice, but would then fund the growth plan if they could see the light at the end of the tunnel, if they could see we're going to be on our feet and operating in a way that makes them proud to be the owners of the Virgin Islands, which is what they are, then that's what you do. So if you look at a company, you can look at a company like Amazon.com that just lost money for a long time. But why was it able to raise funds? Because they had a vision that people believed would work. Look at Tesla. All they've done is lose money, $12 billion. But they've raised huge amounts of money because people believe this plan is going to work. Once you have a credible vision, you can get it funded. But you've got to have a credible vision. It's got to be credible to the kinds of people who have the money. It can't be credible to the guy on the street or this. That's what you need to do to get elected. But to actually make it work, you have to have a credible plan and a credible vision to the people who are going to fund it. They have to look at this school thing and say two things. Yes, I can see how this will save $100 million, so we'll give you transition money from our department. And you know what? These people have been trying to make their silly voucher systems work for a long time. And they don't work in the States, and they'll never work. They're unfair. They hurt people, people with low income, and they help the people with high income because their private schools cost double. There's no way around it. I can say, look, here it works because they cost half, and look at it and go, oh yeah, you can make this work. And they like that. It fits their philosophy at the moment. We've got a narrow window to get them to support it. Okay. And they can, all these other things fits their vision of what we're supposed to be doing. And so, and it saves us money. Some of it immediately if they do it, some of it in 6 months, some of it in a year, some of it 2 years, some of it 5 years. If we have a vision to bring in convention centers, because if we have a brain surgeon conference, we get to keep all their income taxes, so that can fund a bond to build a convention center. That's a plausible thing to see. It's not just, oh, we're going to build one because people will come because it's the Virgin Islands.
I want to ask you another question.
We have real financial incentives that I'm talking about, the kind that bring in these vast investments.
I want to ask you another question relative to young people, millennials, looking to get into business, looking to find success. You know, a lot of them struggle with even doing, funding that dream, right? Getting a home. It's been very, very difficult for millennials. But a lot of them want to start businesses, and they find it difficult with some of the hoops and some of the red tapes that they have to go through. You, as a businessman, well established, what would you do as part of this government to incentivize those with no capital, little capital, trying to start up a business?
Okay, so a couple of things. Number one, just for the people already in business, let's renew the licenses every 5 years instead of every 1 year.
Right.
What's the big deal?
I would vouch for that.
Okay. So some of the things like direct flights and licenses, some of them are very simple that just aren't going to get done. Okay, but I would do that. All right. The next thing is you have to understand something like nationally, in the U.S. economy, which is a much better economy, 90% of small businesses fail. So it's not that easy. And so you can have small business loans, but you're going to lose money at all. The EDA has small business loans. They all go bad. I mean, a couple of them might pay. It's money that you're going to lose. So we can't take money out of the GRS, loan it to small business, and lose it. That doesn't make any sense. We don't have that luxury. If we can grow the economy and have surplus funds, we might have the luxury.
But one idea would be, you said, is the 5 year, every 5 year renewal. What else?
Yeah. So we need to make what every business needs is people with money to spend. Okay, that's the main thing. And we don't have that kind of economy. Our economy, what people earn, and let me give you I've still got 5 minutes, the most important thing. I shouldn't have saved it for last. We're earning something like half the national average. And the question is why? Why is the Virgin Islands average income, why is Puerto Rico's half or 60% of the national average? They earn $55,000, we earn $27 on average. Are we different? What's wrong with this thing? So I looked at that and I realized what the difference was. And we get to keep our own tax money, which people say, oh, that's a big advantage over Florida, because Florida has to pay their money to Washington. But when Florida pays their money to Washington, Washington then spends it in the states. Okay, so we pay our money to Charlotte Amalie spends it in the Virgin Islands. So there's no difference except the administration. They still get their tax money spent in Florida, but it has to go to Washington.
It has to go to Washington.
Okay, but for every dollar Florida sends to Washington this year, they're going to get something like $1.35 spent in Florida. Okay, for every dollar we send to Charlotte Amalie, we get $1. For every dollar they send to Washington, they get $1.35. Why? Because the federal government runs $1 trillion deficit this year. They spend more than they tax. Those are just newly created balances by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. They just changed the number up in your account. It's not anybody's taxpayer money. That whole $1 trillion of spending is rightly spent, and it's there to help the economy. They just cut taxes to help the economy. That's rightly spent on a per capita basis among all the states and territories. It's got nothing to do with giving people their tax money or not. The money Florida pays in taxes, the states pay in taxes, okay, that's their tax money. That gets spent back in the states. That's not us. We keep our own tax money fine. But the bonus money, the deficit spending, okay, our share, that would be $300 million a year. Okay, this is pretty serious money. And we've been cut out of this for, 40 years, 1.2 billion or something like that. And so I was talking to the officer at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York about this. I said, and he was the one who covers Puerto Rico. He did the country report. That's what I was reading. He had his name on it. I said, I see Puerto Rico. You say he's earning half the national average. I said, and then I explained just what I explained to you. I said, I think if you do the econometrics, that'll entirely explain why our incomes are half of what they're supposed to be. And if we'd been getting our share of that, they'd be normalized.
Why aren't we getting our share?
Okay. And you know what he said to me? He said, I don't have to do the econometrics. I can tell just by looking at it, you're exactly right. Right? So what we are is we're like this flower that, the states is a flower and we're a flower. The states get the water every day. For us, they wait for it to die, and then they give us water for hardship to try and bring it back. And then as soon as it comes back, they stop, wait for it to die again. wilt, and then they put more water on it. All right, and so it's hopeless. Now, why aren't they doing it? Because they don't know about it. Nobody's ever thought about it. I've talked to congressmen coming down here. They hadn't thought about it. They said, yeah, as long as it's not our money, that's right. Yeah, that should be done. It's like $10 billion a year for Puerto Rico. It's a big number. Okay, and if you notice, when they lost Vieques and they lost their federal funding in their 936 program, that's when the whole thing collapsed. That was making up for this $10 billion that they weren't getting from deficit spending because they were getting it through federal contracts for the military and everything else. We don't get any of that.
Right.
Right. So we would be getting an extra $300 million a year of federal contracting. All we have to do is go to the Department of Interior, which I did 10 years ago when Angie Williams was there. And she said, yeah, this is good. We can do this for you, but I have to do it with your elected representatives. I can't do it with a private citizen. And so if I had won as delegate to Congress, I could have done it. But if I win as governor, I can do it. They want us to do well. They will go to bat for us. It's a cabinet level position. They'll go to Congress and say, look, there's been a major injustice here. These people have been left out of the loop in how federal contracts are awarded, which is kind of spread out among the states, this $1 trillion of contracts, which is what most of it is. It's not handouts of money.
Right.
And that's worth like 3 lime trees, right? That we're missing out on. And all the money these people get and federal benefits and everything else. And so...
and you said you spoke to the Federal Reserve guy recently, and he said that...
Well, it was 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the Puerto Rican problem hit.
Right, and he responded positively?
Oh, yeah, they all do. They're not out to get us.
So why don't you think that the governor or delegate to Congress hasn't do you think they've spoken about this?
No. I spoke to Donna Christensen at length.
What did she say? What was
it? Very good. Yes. And then nothing happens. I spoke to Stacey Plaskett about it, Delegate Plaskett. I spoke to John DeYoung. I spoke to Ken Mapp, Governor Mapp now, when he used to work at the Quarry, and he was. So
do you think that they probably mentioned it, or do you think that they don't mention it at all?
I think they don't, because they don't know how to articulate the story. And plus, look, there's been a movement out there to make. It was an email sent out that I put in the newspaper years ago when I was running for delegate to Congress from Donna Christensen saying, to the Democratic Party, we have to do everything we can to make sure Mosler never holds public office. And that's what they've been doing. And that's how the party system works. And I don't hold anybody personally responsible for that, but that's how it works.
Let's speak about our tourism product before we run out of time, and we're running out of time here. You wanted to stay there a little bit, or are you good? Because I want to talk about tourism. Okay, so let's go to tourism. You've been paying attention, of course, and you know our numbers relative to, especially cruise ship.
Yeah, it's sickening.
Has declined majorly. You have no Caribbean ports, more attractive ports.
Again, there's some simple things.
Okay, what would you do?
We charge, and I talked to Port Authority, we charge $13 and something landing fees. So the boat's got 5,000 people on it, it's $65,000. It insults them, infuriates them that we charge that much for a landing fee. They go somewhere else. And so how much money do we get for each passenger? And he says, well, $287 they spent. So we're going to make a lot more than $13 off of that for the government, through taxes, through income taxes, and everything. He goes, yeah, I know. I said, well, why don't we just reduce the fees? He says, well, we can't do that because Port Authority is independent, and they have to, they need those fees to make payroll. So we'll just pay them out of the general funds. He says, well, we don't have that kind of coordination in government. Okay, so the government can make $50 or $75 off of each additional passengers, and in return, subsidize the Port Authority, give them $10 of that, $70, so they can make their payroll. And we'd all be ahead by $60, and they can't do it. Now, any businessman can do that. But the government's so tied up in bureaucracy, they can't do that. Well, that's going to be, that ends when I get in there. So we can do that.
So that would be part of your plan?
The plan is to go to the cruise ship companies and ask them what they want. They want St. Thomas to be their premier destination. They like St. Thomas. And
part of the hindrance you're saying, or part of the reason why we're seeing a reduction is because of that landing fee?
Yeah, that's maybe a tenth of it.
Or
20, whatever it is. They have a whole list of things.
Because they've spoken, there was a conference last year, and they said, they basically told the territory, the leaders, innovate or get left behind. What would you do in terms of innovation to make our ports more
attractive? Say to them, what do we have to do in terms of innovation? Because they have all the scientists and the psychologists to figure out what cruise passenger wants. They say, you got to paint the streets polka dot. So we paint the streets polka dot. Whatever they want. It's just a capital goods to bring in tourists, right? And then let all the businessmen reopen up again, and all the jewelry stores, and double the cruise ships to where they're supposed to be, or whatever. So if you give them if you work with them, they'll tell you what they want, and they know you have to make something. They don't.
So part of the plan is you would of course get insight as to what they want.
They did this before. They had a plan before. We turned it down. Okay, we don't. I've seen the negotiations every once in a while in videos, that go on with these people when they sit in front of the Senate. All they do is insult them. Oh, how much money do you make personally? $400,000 a year. You're making $400,000 a year. Why should we deal with a company that paying that kind of? They can't get anywhere. They're just confrontational. You can't be confrontational and get anywhere.
All right. So part of your plan, and again, we're just trying to get with the plans. The part of your plan would be, of course,
we need somebody to work with these people.
Reduce the landing fee. We
all have the same goal.
Right. So you'd reduce the landing fee.
Well, I'd ask them, what do you think is a fair landing fee where we'd have more ships? And they say $8.
Right.
$9.
So you'd work with them on that.
Say, okay, good.
Yeah. And then next, you would listen to what they have to say as to what we.
Yeah, they want the whole place revamped in certain ways. They have. They have these psychologists who take focus groups and go to places, and they know what to do. They know what to do. They're professionals.
So they're professionals. They know what to do. They have demands of us. They want us to revamp, our infrastructure to make it more attractive. Where are we getting the funding from, though?
They'll pay for it. They've offered.
You think they'll pay for it?
Yeah, or they'll finance it over time, and it'll be paid for out of some TIF bond or something. They'll do this stuff. They'll buy their own TIF bonds. These people have a a lot of money. So if they can make a profit, they'll do it.
All right.
They've already offered to pay for this stuff.
They've offered to pay for it. Yeah. Okay. So that's part of your plan. And again, just trying to get your points.
All businesses do that.
Yeah. Just trying to get your points here. We're not sure if they're going to pay for it. You said they've offered to pay for it in the past.
Yeah. I was told that by the Port Authority that they offered to pay for it, and we turned it down. I don't know why. But I can imagine getting into these confrontational arguments about, are you going to hire people from here or for somewhere else? It's like, you get penny wise and pound foolish, right?
So Port Authority officials told you that the cruise companies once offered to pay to revamp our territory.
I don't know how large. They're not going to revamp the whole territory, but for whatever.
I know what you mean. Yeah, relative to the industry.
We have to coordinate WICO with Port Authority. They're at odds with each other half the time.
I think they're working out some stuff now.
Yeah, they're working out stuff now. I've been here 15 years, and finally they're working some stuff out when cruise ships drop to zero.
So
you got to do this when you're zero. You got to do it when you're strong.
Right. So again,
you don't wait for the flower to die and then try and give it some water.
Landing fees. Look at what they want, and you're saying
What about but the hotels is even larger than the cruise ships. We're not bringing our hotels back to life. We're not trying to work out bridge loans to help our hotels.
So again, so that is part of your plan, because I know we were just picking
to have an urgency. We have to decide whether we want Keneal Bay rebuilt or not. If we don't, fine, we can move on to something else. But if we decide we do, we don't wait 2 years and decide and lose $200 million of revenues. You decide now. Do we want it or not? And if we do, you get it done yesterday. You don't because that still is going to take a while. We've just lost a year. Just nothing. It's in Congress waiting for I don't know what. We haven't even decided if we want it rebuilt yet. There's no urgency about these things. These things need a serious sense of urgency. St. Thomas is the lifeblood
of the territory. Yeah. Another thing that needs a serious sense of urgency is the crime situation in the territory.
Yeah.
Right. And of course, I mean, just over the weekend we had another homicide, and on St. Croix, a young man came from the States. He's in the army, or was in the army. And there's no confirmation as to whether he's dead, but he's gone missing, and he just came to visit his mom. And the vehicle that he was driving, according to the commissioner, they found it burned up with a body in there. Serious crime situation in our territory. Your plans to help quell that situation, and give me the points there.
Okay, so there's a major social issue, and then there's police issues. So the police issues are things like cameras, monitors, things like that, and because our neighborhoods and our roads are reasonably easy to monitor with cameras. So, for example, Frederickstead North, there's only one road, so you can monitor things in and out. So there's a lot more we can do with electronics. I've got a whole section of it here. And I also have another controversial proposal, which I don't see myself as the moral authority for the territory. I can put some leadership, but not the moral authority. So we're going to have to decide on this. But I think, certainly every boy between the age of 16 and 24 has to either be in school, full-time job, or in the National Guard. we just don't have the luxury of keeping people idle. And the way a society controls, the men of that age tells you, says all about what that society is going to be like. Because that's just part of bringing up children.
Bold plan there.
Yeah, and I know you can argue about it, but I just want to propose this as something that you don't hear very often. I talk to people in the National Guard, and they think it's a good idea, and I think the federal government would allow it as a pilot program.
It's almost like a draft.
Exactly, because back when we had the draft, we didn't have these kinds of problems.
You think it will go anywhere though? Because people would put pounds on it.
I don't know, but
but
I'll throw it out there.
Yeah.
How serious do we want to get? Look, we can put a GPS on every car, so we know where everybody is. At that point, do we want to give up that much privacy in order to have
surveillance?
Safety? Yeah. Do you want it? It's a trade-off between privacy and safety.
So the two components there: more cameras in our neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So that police could monitor.
Also, we can fund night watchmen in the neighborhoods. You pay people $15 an hour just to walk up and down with flashlights and a radio. They're not armed. They're not anybody's risk. Just so there's somebody watching. And you can have doesn't have to be locked, but you've got streets where, they can have a little information post set up and well lit at night, and people in the neighborhood have somebody out there, and those things tend to deter crime. The other thing is, a lot of our projects, especially the ones closest to the cities, I would convert to senior citizens. Senior citizens need to be near Christiansted, near Frederiksted, where these things are, so they can walk and they don't need rides everywhere. And then put the families out in the single-family homes where the kids aren't packed into these housing communities where they can get in trouble and form gangs and everything. Get them out where their families can control them better. And so,
So that's part of your plan?
That's one of the things I can envision doing. It's not going to get us out of our $200 million.
No. So because we're talking about crime now.
Yeah. So and so we've got. I think that goes. These types of things go a long way, and you got to do all of them. I've talked to people from the police department, particularly Oakland Benta, and I think he's got some excellent ideas. And people like that who've been in the middle of it can tell me about it, just like I can tell you about how the financing works. When I want to know about those things, I'm not out on the streets working with these kids and bringing them in and watching them go. And we have all kinds of legal issues, right?
Yeah.
We have laws on the books that make it more difficult for the police, that make it more difficult for
the consent decree.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we've got to if we're serious, we got to review all this stuff. But we haven't been serious about it. I don't think we've been serious about it.
Okay.
So you can say it's a large issue, but people keep voting the same people into office, and if they were serious about it, it wouldn't happen.
Why do you think, you've run for delegate to Congress a few times, and now, you've joined the gubernatorial field. Why do you feel you weren't successful in your past attempts?
I think the things I was proposing were not important enough. Okay, I think there were more important things to people, like party loyalty, family loyalties, things like that, which is fine. That's how life is. There are things I do where I would rather have my brother in than somebody else, even though he's less qualified, because he's my brother. Okay, I understand that. I'm not. But at some point, if that becomes less important, if things are critical enough, then you look to try something else.
And you feel we're at that juncture right now?
Well, the vote will tell us. Okay, because I've got these kinds of proposals. That's all I have. I'm not saying, look, I'm your brother, vote for me, I'm your cousin. I want you to reward me because I built a ferry or something like that. I'm not saying any of that. I mean, that to me, that was my own reward. But what I'm saying is, here's what I've got, right? Plus, it's outlined. You've seen my website. I mean, there's a lot of detail there. This is how I think we can solve these serious problems. I can't guarantee anything. These are proposals for what I'm going to do. I can lay out my experience and what I've done in the past to give you some indication. I've been successful in the past. I don't need the job. I wouldn't be wasting my time doing it if I didn't think I had a chance to make it happen. Like, why would I do this if I didn't think it could happen? Just to be governor and wave a flag or something? That's not Too old for that.
So we're running out of time, and Warren, I want you to, and before we go there, you know, I want to speak of course, we're running out of time. This is the VIPC. We're going to give Mr. Mosler a chance to speak into the camera and address the people before we leave. But of course, we want to thank you for joining us on VIPC with gubernatorial candidate Warren Mosler. We got a lot of candidates lined up for you. Next week's going to be a big gubernatorial week. We got Albert Bryan coming in on Tuesday, I believe, followed by Governor Kenneth Mapp, and we're trying to get the other candidates on the show in the lead up to, of course, November 6th. So, again, thank you, Warren, for joining us. And I want you to look into this camera
right here
and speak to the people.
Okay. Good night, everyone. I'm Warren Mosler, independent candidate for governor, running with Roy Fonseca from St. Thomas. I'm running entirely as a matter of conscience. I see what's going on around us, and I just can't. I have proposals that I think can make everything a lot better, and I just can't sleep at night unless I'm out there promoting my proposals and offering to get the job done. So if take a look at the proposals, take a look at my website, mosler4governor.com with the number 4. If you like what you see and you want it to happen, I'm asking for your vote. And we're number 7 on the ballot. Lucky 7. Roll with number 7. And I want to thank Ernest. He's come a long way. He's built this business, and it's just, if you want an example of somebody starting their own small business against all odds and working absurd hours, you know, violating the minimum wage law. If you look at how many hours you worked and how much money you've made. This is the kind of people coming up that make the kind of society we want to be in. And again, I just thank you very much. And I have nothing but admiration for what you've accomplished. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us on another edition of VIPC. Like I said, we have a lot more interviews coming up for our residents in St. Thomas and the St. Thomas and John district. We will be interviewing the Senate candidates there as well. Do you want to say something?
Last minute. Frederickstead.
Yeah.
I'd like to see Frederickstead be the UVI campus. Start transferring things there, start restoring the old buildings and using them for classrooms and offices and professors and visiting professors, and bring that kind of life and have a school of the arts in Frederickstead, and build that little town that way. I think it would be a wonderful college town.
Awesome.